We're going to create a standard random number generating while loop, but when the loop is finished, we want to do a one-button dialog which says the loop is done. Let's begin. Create a waveform chart, a stop button, and on our block diagram, a while loop surrounding them. We'll put in our random number generator and hook that up to our chart. Of course, we'll put a short delay inside the loop. And then we're going to create a pop-up. So from the dialog palette, a one-button dialog that says done. We want to move this over here so that it happens after the loop. Now, observe what happens when we run this VI. The loop is started, the chart is being graphed, but our pop-up happens immediately. The reason for that, of course, is that there's no data flow dependency between the chart and the done pop-up. There's nothing that tells the pop-up to happen after the waveform chart is finished being plotted. This is one of the likely scenarios where a sequence structure can be quite helpful. From the structures palette, let's choose a sequence structure. Let's start with the flat structure. So the flat structure, much like all the other structures that we've used up to this point, is defined by dragging a rectangle on the block diagram. Again, that encompasses whatever code we've drawn around. Now we have our sequence structure. In order to create another frame, we right-click on the edge of the sequence structure and we choose Add Frame After. Because this is a flat sequence structure which we've selected, we see all the frames at once. All that needs to happen now is we need to take the desired code and put it in the second frame. Flat sequence structures always execute from left to right. So now let's observe the behavior. We run our plot. As soon as we push the stop button, then the done pop-up happens. We can manipulate the flat sequence structure by right-clicking on it and choosing from either insert frame, if it's a middle frame, which will create a frame in between the two that have been selected, or if we are on one of the edge frames, to add frame before or add frame after. Also, of course, we can delete a selected frame, or we can right-click on a border and choose to merge frame, which will put those two frames together. Another option, instead of a flat sequence structure, is to use the stacked sequence structure. Let's begin by removing the structure entirely. From the Structures palette, we choose Stacked Sequence, and again we encompass our code. This looks very much like the flat sequence that we created previously. Observe what happens when we add a frame after. Notice how the first frame is now obscured by the second frame. And we have a pull down here which looks very much like the case structure, but allows us to list all of the frames that have been defined. Much like its name suggests, the stacked sequence structure behaves just like the flat sequence, executing the sequence frames from 0 to the end sequentially. So of course, if we run this at this stage, we plot, we stop, and it says done. One of the different features between the stacked sequence structure and the flat sequence structure is that it becomes very difficult to wire between the frames. In fact, it's impossible. To solve that, a structure called the sequence local was created. By using the sequence local, we can insert data in a previous frame and have it be accessible in all later frames. For example, let's say we want to display the total number of times the loop ran. So we want to take the final value of our loop iteration. Observe that because it is a while loop, auto-indexing is off by default. And when we connected that wire to our sequence local, notice how the arrow indicated to the right. What that means is that the value is being inserted into the sequence local. In later frames, the arrow is in the opposite direction, indicating now that this is available for use. we can create an indicator here and call this final loop index. And observe now that when we run the code, when it finishes, then the loop index is displayed in the numeric indicator.